Welcome to the Pod and Deliver podcast. My name is Ruben Aguilar, and this is Jacob Aguilar, co-host. How are you doing, Jacob?
I'm doing great.
We have a couple of special guests today. We have Francisco Loaiza and Cris Aguilar. How are you doing, Frank?
Doing well, thank you.
Cris, how you doing over there?
I'm doing well in the windy foothills.
It is very windy in the foothills, as I know as well. So today we'll be discussing this book right here. I don't know if you can see it. There it is.
Pull it back a little.
12 Rules for Life by Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson, philosopher, psychologist, and provocateur of sorts. He got into trouble at his university for what he said were extremist demands. That's for another show. But he wrote this book, 12 Rules for Life, in which we'll cover 6 of those rules tonight. We'll talk about them. And I want to start with Frank. Frank, you have you read the whole book, or have you at least covered the 6? Can you talk about the 6?
Yes, well, I haven't read the entire book yet. It's actually difficult because there's so much to bring in. It's like drinking from a fire hydrant sometimes, you know. But I've read the first 6. Yeah.
And I'm going to ask some hard questions because there's a lot to this. Before you tell me I'm going to give you time to think about what you would say is your favorite of the 6 rules. I'm going to read this quote about Jordan Peterson, just to give you an idea of those of you who, I'm sure everybody's heard of him, but just in case you don't know, on the cover of this book, here's a quote from the New York Times. Peterson is the most influential public intellectual in the Western world right now. That's quite a statement, and I would think that's a reason for hope in the midst of maybe some bad news in the world today. So let's start with Frank. What would you say is your favorite of the 6 rules?
The rule that stood out to me the most, you know, I don't want to be just limited to one, but the one that came to me, let's see.
Play by the rules, Frank. Play by the rules.
Play by the rules, yeah. Is basically rule number 3. I want to read the actual.
Yeah.
Treat yourself like someone. I'm sorry, that's number 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like it so much. I memorized it, right?
Can I read the rule? Can I say the rule?
Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Make friends with people who want the best for you.
Yes.
Why do you like that rule?
Because a lot of times when people choose friends, they don't think about that. They only think about maybe having things in common with somebody. A lot of times you meet friends because maybe you like the same type of music, you like the same type of television show, and you have those things in common, you know. And I think it happens when we're younger. You know, you have something in common. You like heavy metal, and you hang out with the heavy metal guys in high school, or you're disco and you like the disco or whatever. I guess in the 80s it was more like cha-cha music, or I don't know what you want to call it. As you get older, you have to make more of a wiser choice or you even have to, like, I don't know what the right word is, maybe sift your friends or decide which ones are worthy to keep. And that sounds kind of cold, but there's some wisdom to that, I think.
Fair enough.
Time is short. Time is short, right, Frank? So you got to be cold.
Well, Jordan Peterson, I think he talks about at the end of that chapter about, hey, I don't want to be cold here. I'm not trying to be, unfeeling here, but hey, you know what? Let's look at telling our friend or supposed friend that, you know what? Let me get healthy, or let me refer you to someone. But this relationship that we're having is not a good relationship. Let's part ways, And I think sometimes it's hard to do that. It's like not marriage, but it's like relationships. Maybe in the past before you got married, where you say, wait a minute, this is not a good relationship. I got to break this up. Or they say that to you because it's unhealthy. And so that goes with male friends, female friends, I think. Don't you think, Frank?
Yes, I agree. Yeah, because one of the things that he mentioned is some friends that he grew up with, they went to parties and such, and later on in life, he kind of went a different direction, went to school and tried to improve himself. And then he met back with a couple of his friends from his youth and saw that their life took kind of a bad turn. And you kind of wonder how that would have influenced him if we would have kind of stayed in town and stayed with those friends. Unfortunately, that may have, hindered his growth or development.
I am so tempted to share a little bit from that chapter, but I there's so many good things from other chapters. I'm gonna let you have the last word, unless Cris picked the same chapter or the same rule. But good input on that rule. But what would you say, Cris, is your favorite of the 6 rules?
Well, I mean, staying on rule 3, it is definitely my top 1 or 2. So I'd probably say chapter 1, the first rule was my favorite, but staying on chapter 3, it was right up there. So I think what Frank was saying is right on. Is that as we grow older, sifting is a good word, I think, and it does seem a little cold or a little harsh, as Jake and him were discussing, but I think one of the things that he mentions in that chapter is something like a good friend or a great friend won't tolerate my cynicism. They won't tolerate my cynicism or destructiveness, and they will punish me if I mistreat myself that way. So I think not only obviously they wouldn't do that to me, but they wouldn't even allow me to do it to myself. So man, wouldn't that be great, and isn't that a great friend? So yeah, that's one of the things that was a highlight out of that chapter.
As you were talking, real quick follow-up to what you're saying, it's such a challenge. A whole world could just, a world of thought and ideas can just come out of what you just said about how to even approach your friend to not allow him to sink into that cynicism, because that itself is a skill. And that could prove to be difficult. But you mentioned rule number 1, and I just thought I would read what that rule is. It's because you mentioned rule 3 and rule 1. Stand up straight with your shoulders back.
Yeah, so that basically fix your posture. I mean, he goes deep, I think, in this first chapter in science, not only in biology, but just in psychology all over the place. I mean, he hits on a lot of points in that first chapter, and he sums it up with fixing your posture. And another way of saying that, maybe I have this down as the whole rule, but basically fixing your posture, others will treat you with more respect. So
yes.
I think go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing. I was just saying yes.
Cool. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting how I think not only does that give us confidence, he states through various ways. He talks. My son Stephen and I were talking about it earlier because we're both reading it together, basically along with all of us, by the way. But talks about a lobster and how vying for not only respect in the ocean, but respect in their little caves and in their little nooks and crannies to protect themselves, and all the way to standing up for yourself and speaking up for yourself, speaking up for what's right and wrong. So yeah, just standing tall, literally putting your shoulders back. And I think my brothers and I would agree to this. I don't know about Frank if you had this in your childhood, but my mother, all the way to this day, and my father still talk about my posture and how I need to work on that. And my girlfriend Veronica definitely talks about that still, because I definitely have that issue. So I liked it because it was practical for me, as well as something that's happened, that focused in on my life personally. So,
you guys picked great chapters. And do you mind and I don't want to jump the gun, Ruben, but my favorite quote is from chapter 1. I just love it.
Me too. Go ahead.
And there's like 3 or 4 quotes, but this is one. It's towards the end of the chapter. It's on page 27. It says, "So attend carefully to your posture. Quit drooping and hunching around. Speak your mind. Put your desires forward as if you had a right to them, at least the same right as others. Walk tall and gaze forthrightly ahead. Dare to be dangerous. Encourage the serotonin to flow plentifully through the neutral pathways, desperate for its calming influence." Oh man, that was so poetic as well. But it makes me like while I'm reading it, I'm like, I want to stand straight, and I want to be, when you do that, people see you differently. But when you're down, have you seen people who are just like, you just feel like they're already lost? They're already, and it reminds me of our childhood too, Cris. I remember that and remember that. I think it's because we did it a lot. And it's kind of pointing the direction of, hey, are you sure of yourself? Do you feel good about yourself? Do you have a path forward? And I think Jordan Peterson saying that's just the first step, and then you move forward. Anyway, I love that quote.
But he also mentions that sometimes we don't feel it. We don't feel that confidence, or we don't feel that drive, or we don't want to do certain things. But in kind of summarizing how he states, it's basically fake it till you make it. And so even if you don't feel like it, it's okay. You just do it. You just put your shoulders back, fix your posture, and you will eventually feel better about whatever you're working on. And he even talks about studies on smiling, and that's a big sales trick. You smile while you're making your phone calls. Smiling, different body language things he talks about, I think are really important. So yeah, it's a really good chapter.
Well, what's really great about that rule is anybody can do it. It is a basic thing that even a child can do when all else has failed. When you can't find a solution, everybody can, put their shoulders up with their back straight. His quote is, "To stand up straight with your shoulders back is to accept the terrible responsibility of life with eyes wide open." So no matter your station in life, even if everything has gone wrong, at least you can do this, and it's the first step. So I really like that. I won't pick it because somebody else picked that chapter. But
What's your chapter?
Jake, what's your rule? What's your
mine?
favorite?
Oh, geez. One was good. 6 has been bothering me, though. I mean, I liked 1, but 6 has been kind of gnawing at me. So I'm thinking, because it's gnawing at me, it probably may be the one that I needed to read. It was good for me to have read it. And that is, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. There have been different times in my life. It's a very convicting chapter. There's been times in my life where I speak out when my house wasn't in order, when I wasn't in order. And it talks about how it talks about the Columbine murders and how these kids who were just not, there was no center, or maybe they lost their center, and then talk about some other adults who had the same issues, where anger and turmoil, and then you start blaming God and you start blaming people. And people like that when they're starting to get in that angry mode, and that it's someone else's fault. And then you get to the point where you might even be violent with yourself or with someone else. And so I remember, you guys, about 3 years ago, I had a situation where I was starting to get angry and bitter, but I was doing wrong. You know what I'm saying? And so when that happens, then yes, you start blaming God and other people. But Jordan Peterson's really, he's always has this, I don't want to say a solution, but he says, hey, why don't you try this? In the end, he says, oops, let me see here. I'm sorry. My computer popped up a message. So his solution, or his thoughts were, hey, you know what? Why don't you, find some things that you could to have victory in, right? Why don't you work on that relationship at home? Why don't you work with that friendship, right? And I'm like, oh, that's what I did 3 years ago. I started working with some relationships I had in my life and getting that taken care of, and also realizing that, hey, maybe I'm the one bringing some turmoil into this situation. So I love it how he brings it back to the person saying, hey, why don't you find some solutions that are right in front of you and start working on those small ones. And then you get to a point where you're like, oh, wow, life, I'm doing a lot better here. I don't want to and beat up the world. I don't want to curse God anymore. So again, I think I like that chapter because it hit close to me, and I guess maybe probably all these chapters, there's the chapter that hit close to you. But I do love 1 and 3. It's like, I almost picked 1 because there was so much. I mean, I felt like he's so thorough. Like, he gives a very simple title, but then he gives a thorough back, evidence or information. So that's Jordan Peterson, right?
I was impressed, if you don't mind me saying, I was impressed with the fact that in every chapter that I've read so far, he, like Cris mentioned earlier, he definitely alludes to science. He's a psychiatrist, right? Or psychologist.
Yes.
So,
or psychiatrist, yeah.
Psychiatrist. Yeah, clinical psychologist, right?
Yes.
So he has the background. I mean, the guy has done the study. He's read the books. He even mentions that. I've read the books. I've done the studies. I've read the studies. But he also gives that level of evidence for each rule, but he also gives spiritual evidence. He gives metaphysical evidence. He quotes the Bible. He quotes the New Testament, the Old Testament. He even quotes the book of the Gospel of Thomas, which I've never read myself. It's not traditional.
Mm-hmm.
But nothing is unattainable. All 6 that I've read so far, I mean, I know all 12, but I haven't read the whole book, admittedly. But all 6 are attainable, and all of them contain truth. And it's we're all educated, all 4 of us. It's nothing new, but it's explained in a way that's palatable and attainable, and it just makes sense.
Yeah.
And so I get excited. I get excited because things that we've always known were true are now being explained in a way that is irrefutable, I think.
Yeah.
And when you say also, I think in Rule 6, he talks about stuff as simple as, are you doing anything you know is wrong? And then he like hits that last little tap by saying, stop it today. So are you doing something you know is wrong? Stop it today. Very practical, very 10 Commandments like, very simple. Another one that I think it's it's definitely in Rule 6 is stop saying things that make you feel ashamed or cowardly. Start saying things that make you feel strong. Do only those things about which you would speak with honor. So, and I like that he used that word honor. Just it's so simple, yet, and things that, like Frank was saying, we were taught, as children in church, high schoolers, and in college, but now it's just like, okay, honor is important again, and he's like preaching honor, which is fantastic, and I think in today's time is so important.
Yes, you mentioned his use of either you, Cris, or Frank mentioned his use of the scriptures, and Cris mentioned church. It seems that Christ has resonated with him. Jesus has resonated with him, and it made me think as to why. And as I look through these rules, I see I'm not comparing him to Christ, Jordan Peterson, but I compare the rules as Christ-like in the sense that it can connect to the greatest theologian, but also to a child would understand some of these precepts.
Yeah.
So, for example, because we're on the Rule 6, clean up your life, and part of cleaning up your life is something a child will understand. Get good at your job, and to make peace with people. So, before you change the world, are you at peace with somebody? I'm really glad he brought that up, because anybody can do it, and a lot of people haven't, and they need to do it, So I could really appreciate that. I want to comment on rule number 2, and here's what it is. Treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. And it's interesting because I think although I don't know if he said it explicitly in this rule, but I think he's connecting to the element of how to truly be happy in life. And here's a quote. You have some vital role to play in the unfolding destiny of the world. So everybody is valuable. Not to say, I know there's some people believe that your life can change the world, but everybody has the role. Everybody can do something in impacting. their world, those around them. So he kind of hits on the idea of suicide in that chapter. And he mentions Nietzsche, he whose life has a how can bear almost any why. So I think the moment you tap into your role, into other people's lives, you really find meaning and happiness. And I think that's an important chapter in that respect.
Is there anything like a specific of any of these chapters that you feel like may be difficult to like I told you about my chapter 6, where I felt this is just kind of difficult to handle. Was there anything that made you feel uncomfortable, Cris or Frank, that you felt like, wow, this is an uncomfortable piece? I'm not sure. I know people out there. There's a lot of people out there who look at Jordan Peterson and are very skeptical, or they're also very, they've questioned, what he's all about. He's got a lot of young people. I would say young men following him. And I think most of us would agree with. That's great that it has people following or listening to some of these great rules that are all really about building yourself up. But was there anything that you felt like, wow, that was kind of uncomfortable? That's kind of popped out in your head?
I think Cris is uncomfortable. I think he gave up on us. Where's Cris? Oh, there he is.
Hey, Cris, join us.
Well,
You want to go first, Cris?
I
hear you.
Yeah, I mean, I Rule 4 was, I mean, in a way, it was really good because I'm working on that part of my life, but I would also say it's
let me
difficult.
just, not to interrupt you, Cris, let me just read Rule 4 and then Rule 4 is compare yourself to who you were yesterday, not to someone else, not to who someone else is today.
Yeah, so my version of that is sometimes I compare myself to where I thought I would be, which is not who I should be judging myself on yesterday, which is a really great way of looking at it. And the big takeaway and the thing that I had already been working on, and this may help me to see that I'm on the right track, which is basically doing a little bit every day, taking a little aim, a little bite out of whatever I need to get done every day as I work on the different projects that I have going. And that could be anything from household chores to business stuff to relationships. How do I take a little bit of what I call aim, a little bit of a challenge or a little problem or whatever I need to get done. And so I think one of his thing is, if you have a pile of paperwork, don't look at the pile, just look at 2 or 3 things that need to be done, and then treat yourself. So, and I believe that's the chapter that he focuses a lot on treating yourself well, and giving yourself, props or giving yourself positive reinforcement, basically. But the main takeaway I got was to judge myself from who I was yesterday. And so, am I growing? Am I succeeding? Am I actually getting things done?
It's such an element of connectivity to your own happiness, because once you're comparing to other people, that's going to impact that happiness again. Jake, am I right when I say we have time for a couple more?
A couple minutes more, yeah.
Okay. Just one last one. We didn't cover one rule, and that is, do not let your children do anything that makes you dislike them. Any takers?
That one made me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah. Can I share something? I think Frank Loaiza is really good at spotting children who misbehave and letting know the adult who's responsible for them that they're misbehaving. But he always does it in a good way where I'm like, wow, A, he's telling truth, and B, I need to deal with this. And it makes me realize that sometimes my kids have been misbehaved, but it's an embarrassment sometimes if they're, and I don't think my kids are misbehaving. They're older now, but when they're younger, but you've seen those kids where they just act crazy.
No, Jake, no.
Okay. All right. My kids
they misbehave.
All right. They misbehave. But listen, I'm just talking about other people's kids. No, but yeah, so, I mean, I think we've all seen those kids and we think, and I remember my mother would say, you know what, whose parents are those? She'd always say, hey, if you guys misbehave, you're representing me. Right. And, and I'm sure Frank, your mom said the same thing, and father.
Yes,
So,
yes.
that chapter, I think we all could relate to a little bit.
And it's shocking because I think one of the things that I've heard him talk when he talks about this chapter, or what I've heard him say is, people, you would think he thought that people would be very, very upset about this chapter, but that's not the one that's upset people the most. It's other chapters or rules. But the fact that putting the thought into people that a parent can get annoyed, or does he actually say, I don't think he says hate. He just says dislike them.
Yeah.
You think, oh, I love my children all the time, 100 Monday, January through December, Monday through Sunday, I love. But of course you love your children, but you don't always like your children. In any relationship, there's times where you don't like that other person. But there's healthy ways to deal with it. To tell your child, you know what, mijo, right now is not a good time to talk to me. I need to take a break. And the one thing he says, don't lie to your kids. If you're in a bad mood, let them know. Let them know it's not a good time to interact with them. And they'll know, okay, it's daddy's time or mommy's time to kind of cool off, but don't lie to your kids. And that's one thing that I appreciate about him is it's very practical and he's very honest. And his daughter, I don't know his daughter, but I've seen his daughter on different podcasts, and she is a very good reflection of her father. I'm very impressed with, I've seen her podcast, and I'm very impressed with the way she presents herself. So I know he's done a good job as a father.
Well, thank you very much. That should wrap it up. I appreciate you both coming on to our podcast, and tune in next week where we cover the second half, the next
12,
6 of the 12 rules. So thanks once again to Frank and Cris for joining us, and signing off for Jacob. This is Pod and Deliver. See you next time.
See you next time. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.